What's going on, South by East fans? Welcome back to another traffic report here in the intersection with Donnavan Dillon from Loud Light. Welcome back, Donnavan.
Thanks for having me.
And we are going to be picking up from our conversation last week, a topic that seems to be hot right now in people's minds and has been coming across has been ranked choice voting. So, Donnavan, could you tell us what is ranked choice voting and why should we care about it?
Yeah, so in the democracy that we live in, there are so many ways that elections can be structured, and there's no perfect formula for what system we have. So there are a lot of different ways that we could do it, and ranked choice voting is one of them. So what ranked choice voting, the premise that ranked choice voting is centered under is the idea of the most supported candidate winning.
Okay.
So in our current system, we cast one vote per one candidate,
Right.
And what that has left us with in modern day is, for example, in Kansas, any Democrat voting for Joe Biden per se might say my vote is wasted, you know? There's so many people who are going to vote Republican. My values aren't going to be represented.
Right.
So what ranked choice voting aims to do is to ensure, so pretty much you take your candidates and how many ever candidates, that's how many ever numbers you get. So you'd have your first pick, your second pick, third, and so on.
Okay.
And you do that for all of the candidates. So how ranked choice voting is, there's basically rounds. So in that first round, when everybody has their first pick, if that top candidate doesn't receive 50% of, well, 51 and a vote,
Right.
percent of the votes, they would be the elected person. What happens though, if in that first round they don't get that, is you take off a candidate, so the last candidate, and everybody who voted for that candidate, their second pick would get that next vote until we reach that 50% margin.
It's like running a tournament, like a tier list tournament.
Yeah.
Like when you put in, like,
Yeah.
okay, this restaurant versus this restaurant, this one's out, this one's out.
Yeah, and
So
what's
looking at the votes,
and
it's
what's
pretty
really
cool.
nice about that system is that people don't feel that their votes aren't going to waste,
Right,
and
so
that even
all votes are created equal
Yeah,
in the
and
current
even if
system.
like your first
Right.
pick didn't win, there's a candidate that reflected the most people's
Right.
concerns and had support to a degree from the most people in the electorate.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really cool because a lot of day in modern time, you have people who are like voting because for the least evil of two candidates.
Right.
And what a system like ranked choice voting does is it encourages more people to run. It encourages cleaner campaigns because you're not just trying to talk smack on your opponent,
Right.
but you're trying
I've
to.
got to have this person win.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want that guy.
And you're also
Right.
trying to bring in as many people as possible to support you, so you have candidates who are appealing to bigger audiences rather than just engaging with their base, which is just the people who would typically support them or that they typically would be trying to have on their side.
Because they need not just the majority vote, but they need to actually win over the hearts of the most amount of people.
Yeah.
That
And I think even in conversations of like the federal elections where you've had presidents who've won the electoral vote, but not the popular vote.
Right.
I think this is
Right.
why ranked choice voting is being something that a lot of people are talking about. And it's been actually a system that so many different communities across the nation have implemented, and even outside of the nation.
Yeah, I was seeing that on you guys' website where it listed kind of different states that have taken on ranked choice voting and then where they use them and
Yeah.
in what elections they use them in. Like, that was really interesting. And it seems like ranked choice voting would really help someone that maybe is running as an independent or someone that just maybe isn't the primary candidate for a particular party, right? Where it's like, hey, but I actually have, my values are more represented by the group of people, which also in the election process is like, well, I want you to know what my values are because you're going to be voting on how you feel about all of my values, not just where I stand in opposition
Exactly.
to the
Yeah.
strongest opponent. That's really cool.
Yeah,
That's
and
really
they've
cool.
used it in like Alaska and New York's, and it's actually where I've seen it being implemented a lot in places that haven't used it historically is at the local level to kind of try and test the waters. And I love local politics. I always say that those are the politics that touch you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you're gonna see if that sidewalk or that stop sign
Come on.
didn't get repaired or put
Come on.
up.
Fam,
Yeah.
we live in one, like, so this Hi-Crest is one of the most underfunded areas in the state. And it's a traditionally redlined neighborhood. And so we spend a lot of time, just as a church fellowship, Hi-Crest, we spend a lot of time speaking with our elected officials. Our director of ministries became the NIA president when they needed a new NIA president. She became the NIA president. And so we literally get to see if our local NIA is not doing what we want. And then the majority, I'd say probably 70% of our staff also lives here in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So if our elected officials, if our local NIA, if our local government aren't doing the things that they say they're going to do, we're going to see them because our kids are the ones tripping on the potholes. Like our kids are the ones who can't ride our bikes on the sidewalks when the programs don't do what they're supposed to do. And so, I completely agree with that. Like the politics that touch you. So the two-party system, or our current electoral system, how has that impacted the way that we vote and our processes, even more specifically on that local level? Because I think we think about the presidential election a lot, but even on the local level, like how has that really impacted our process, like the current system?
Yeah, so I can specifically speak to like my experiences and also just what I hear from people is I feel like there's a lot of voting for the lesser of two evils. There's a lot of like, this person doesn't reflect me in every way, but you know, they're better than the other guy.
Yeah, I definitely.
And it's really this kind of like sad view of like democracy and representation. And I find when things are kind of bring people down and put people in a bad mood, they're not something that people want to join into. So when you talk about our system having people very apathetic or turned away from just the noise of the two-party system and kind of the negative effects that come with it, it's really hard to bring in people who haven't been voting, younger people, to the table, because why would I want to join into a system that's cracking at the seams?
My vote doesn't count.
Yeah, and when I feel like my vote doesn't count, or that I'm just, I'm not going to get what I want, but this guy's like a little better, so like, yeah.
I used to work for the Kansas Democratic Party in high school, and I used to canvass. And I would go around like, hey, are you registered to vote? Are you getting ready to vote? And I'd run into a lot of people that were either convicted felons. Like, so they're like, I got a felony. I can't vote for another 5 years, Jack. Like, move along. It's like, dang, that sucks. That's when I first found out about that, which I was like, that's crazy. Okay. I'm like, okay, we're making decisions about a system that you have no say in. Okay. Or even though, okay. All right, we'll come back to that. And then I would run into a lot of people who are like, hey, fam, do you know how this process works? My vote doesn't count. And I heard that so much canvassing in. I didn't live in Southeast Topeka yet. I lived in East Topeka, but I would canvass in East Topeka, canvassing in Southeast Topeka, canvassing in North Topeka. I heard that so often of people being so distraught and discouraged. Like, how in the world, why would I spend this time voting when I know it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. And it hurts my heart so much because it's kind of like a self-perpetuating system of any identity group. I always get like, young people don't vote. Oh, black people don't vote. And I always like to say, like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, right.
Why are young people like not attracted to voting? Because people love to say like, oh, young people don't care, X people don't care, and I find that very untrue. I mean, I could walk up to anybody on the street and they could probably give me 30 different reasons, things about they care about or that they want fixed in their community, and no one wants to be a part of a community that's struggling or failing or seeing people that you care about under those conditions. So I think that self-perpetuation of like, oh, if we don't vote, then we're not going to have representation. And even if it's voting for people who we might not know. We can't get people into office that will make something different, will shake up the system, will represent our values without buying into that system.
We've got to engage. Another question that came up, and I thought this one was interesting, was how hard or easy is it to get on the American ballot, and how is that compared to other countries?
So this is actually a very interesting question.
I thought so too.
But there is so much like nuance and regulations depending on, I mean, whether you're running for like a local office, a state office, federal office. But generally speaking, some common requirements are there's usually an age requirement.
Okay.
So for the president, I believe it is 35. For state legislature, I believe you have to be 18 of voting age. And you could do so much research into why those are the ages, why those are the deadlines. But generally speaking, it's that you are a citizen of the United States typically, and then also of the community you're representing. And then usually there is an age limit, and then on the resident, usually depending on how, if it's a district, if it's like a precinct, you have to live in that specific areas. And those are the two major ones that we have consistently across the board for running for office. And then typically, at least in Kansas, there's usually a fee associated with like filing.
Okay. What is that?
To get on the ballot.
Kind of a nominal fee, or is it a pretty significant fee? What does that look like?
It depends on what you're running for. I think a fee for running for office is a deterrent for people who don't have the money
I would agree.
for it.
That's why I was wondering.
So I view it as a barrier. But depending on what office you're running for, they're usually not like anything too crazy. But again, a fee is a fee, which is a deterrent.
Yeah, I mean, I live in an area. This weekend we're doing a thing called the Aqua Party. I lead youth things in our church, right? And we're going out. We do different events because we say people need to have a place to belong before they believe, and community is important. Everything that we do should be done in community. And so we do some events that are just for connecting. So no teaching happening, just fun. So we actually get together. We go to the Shawnee County, the Shawnee County Northern Aquatic Center over in North Topeka, and we're just going to have some fun and get together out there. But to get in, it costs between $7 and $13. Younger kids is $2. So what we did is we curbed the price and we bought tickets for our people so that everyone could get in for $2. We invited adult chaperones, and we said for adult chaperones, you get in for free. Because even a $7 fee is a deterrent, because that's a $7 fee plus I live in Hi-Crest, which is a transportation desert. So I've got to find transportation, so I might be giving somebody gas money. I've had parents that work on Saturdays, so they might be taking off of work. So it's like after you put all that stuff together, and it's like, all right, pay $7 to get into the park and eat some food. This is no longer a relaxing day. This is a stressful day that I have to plan for and I have to put things together for, right? And so we're trying to lower that hurdle, because you can't eliminate all hurdles in someone's lives, but you can often lower the hurdle enough to where they can see over and see all the good things that are on the other side. And it's like, all right, it's worth the effort to move that hurdle to get to those things, because they've at least been lowered to where I can see what's coming up. So I completely agree. Like a barrier is a barrier. A hurdle is a hurdle.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, one, it's like connecting with people, hearing their stories, and also like validating what they're feeling. I think around elections, a lot of times, there's this like notion of like you need to register to vote. Oh, like you're sad about X, well, register to vote.
Yeah.
And I mean,
if you voted, then this wouldn't be a problem.
There needs to be a certain level of like understanding and compassion of like why people feel the way they do, because ultimately the system has led to that. And I think to turn a blind eye to that is to really not understanding the work that needs to be done. You also said like lowering barriers. That is like the ultimate goal. I think especially with like civic participation, voting, democracy. Several years back, we saw that like a poll tax or different tests to be able to vote were unconstitutional and ultimately against the values of democracy that our nation is supposed to uphold.
I mean, they sound like Jim Crow laws to me.
And I mean, I have a similar perception of, like these fees for running for office, or like voting locations like not being accessible by public transport, or accessible in general. These are all barriers we should be working towards to lower, so that voting, when you think, oh, I need to vote, it's not, ooh, how am I going to get there? Transportation.
Right.
Oh, childcare. It's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna, like walk down the street to like my local polling location, cast my ballot
exactly.
in a quick, easy, efficient manner, and be on my way.
Yep, and we've got, I know that Avondale East, this building here, operates as a voting spot. We've got another one that's right down the street. It's actually another church, actually, that's right down the street is a voting place as well. And I mean, the reason we do that is because we want to make it accessible. We know that people come here. We know that people live in the neighborhood come here. Let's allow this to be a place where they can get their resources. We're actually working on building a, slightly off topic, but we're working on building a hub of resources here. So here in the building, starting in August, by August 1st, there will be a choice pantry here in the building where people can come get the food that they need, and they get to choose when they come. They don't just get a box.
Yeah.
They get to shop. They get to show up. Hey, here's what I need, and they get to shop. Non-perishable items, food items as well. We'll have pediatric connections from Kansas City coming in to do trauma-based occupational therapy here in the building. We'll have massage therapy here in the building. We'll have some pediatric care here in the building, as well as therapy services here in the building. Why? Because we know that people are here. We know that there's a need here. So if we know that people live in an area and they care about something, which everyone cares about something, then we should always be making a way for them to be civically engaged there in that space, because we know that they're there. And often people don't take advantage of the resources that we have that we say are available, because they're available, but they're not actually accessible.
Yeah.
And so accessibility is so important.
And I mean, there's the stigma, there's like the shame of like, oh, like I really don't know how to cast my ballot. I don't know the voting process. Right. And like people feeling scared to ask. Because I mean, like voting, and a lot of people who are very civically engaged are very critical of people who
are not. Yes, that's true.
So they're not accessible for someone to be like, I mean, like a 30-year-old, like, oh, like I'm 30, I haven't voted my entire life, but I want to. But how do I figure out without like asking someone who's going to be a bit pretentious?
Right, yeah. Really?
Yeah.
You don't vote? Like, I'm fine.
But yeah, and kind of on that accessibility piece, one thing that I think is very interesting about not just Topeka, but Shawnee County is early voting. So early voting is one of the most accessible ways you can vote, depending on how it's implemented and if it's available. So for not just Topeka, but for the entirety of Shawnee County, there is one early voting location, and that is at the county elections office.
Wow.
You guys also have a, because of population, your county, I can't believe, I don't know if it's election commissioner or election clerk, is appointed by the Secretary of State. So they're not elected directly by the people. But yeah, so in all of Shawnee County, early voting is great for, working class people, parents, families, because it's not just the singular election day where lines can get longer. It's a quick in and out. But for the entirety of Shawnee County, and I had to wrap my head around this because I'm like, oh yeah, Topeka only has one early location. No, all of Shawnee County has one early voting location.
That's crazy.
And it's not situated in the middle of the county either.
Fam, I know people who miss church, and we meet at the same time every week. I can't imagine like, oh, I needed to vote early. I missed the one day.
Yeah.
In the one location. I didn't, just getting the information out to make sure that people know, having it in one location it's terrible. It's a nightmare.
And you think about how many people there are in a county, and that there's supposed to be one building that's open just a few hours. Yeah. That's
insane.
And I mean,
almost
we have
defeats the purpose of early voting.
A fellow advocate who does really good work in the city with the YWCA, whose office isn't honestly all that far from the one early voting location. And on her 30-minute lunch break, which not a lot of people are afforded, she couldn't cast her ballot in a way that didn't interfere with, getting back to work on time, and also has like transportation and a lot of the things that you would expect.
Wow.
People with these things can easily vote. And she couldn't do it in like, a short time span on a run. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the point? Right at that point.
Yeah.
I had one other question that came from our viewers that I wanted to make sure I asked, and it was, when did we get our current campaign finance laws, and how do they affect our elections?
Whew. So this is a big one, and
Yeah.
I want to focus on one. There's a really great timeline that Open Secrets has on their website.
Open Secrets. What is Open Secrets?
OpenSecrets.org. They just basically do nonpartisan, nonprofit, and they do a lot of research tracking money in politics. So one of the biggest things that happened in our campaign finance system is in 2010, there was a Supreme Court case, Citizens United versus the FEC, and it basically ruled that corporations have the same free speech rights as people. What's a consequence of this is free speech can look like a lot of different things. Free speech just isn't me saying what I want to say. It could be how I spend my money.
Right.
It could be the shirt that you're wearing.
Right.
Free speech can look like a lot of different things. But in the context of campaigns, as long as corporations aren't colluding with candidates, they can spend how much ever money they want.
Yeah. Okay.
Promoting candidates or going against candidates that fall in line with their values. And this was a major blow to democracy, to how elections are run, and how money has impacted them in the United States at every level. So historically speaking, you have, and that is through what's called a super PAC.
Yeah.
So
can you explain?
So a super PAC is basically, as I explained before, an entity where people can pour in how much ever money they please, typically hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, to be used to impact elections. And with the super PAC, as long as you're not colluding with a specific candidate and just doing it on behalf of your corporation group, you can spend how much ever money you want. You also have PACs where people can like donate into, but there's a bit more regulation with those. And then you just have your small grassroots donors.
Right. So just to make sure, contextualize. So if I have a lot of money, I value and favor a particular candidate, candidate A over candidate B, I can legally spend my money to make sure that candidate A is heard, is represented in the best light, gets better commercials, gets more information out about them, gets more social media presence. I can also conversely spend that money to make sure that campaign election B, electoral B, gets their stuff buried, has negative press placed about them. I can create barriers for people to be able to learn about this candidate, vote for this candidate. Is that what you're saying? That is legally?
Yes, but what's most interesting is that like me and you, if we were to donate to, I believe at a House campaign, there's a $500 limit per finance reporting deadline that we could donate. You can't donate more, you can donate less, but I can't donate to a House candidate in the state of Kansas more than $500.
Okay.
For Senate, I believe it's $1,000.
Okay.
And that, as individuals, we can give to campaigns, but we can't, as our own beings,
essentially fund the campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for PACs, there's also regulations, but for super PACs, it's that unregulated money.
Of course.
And this is backed by corporations. A great example is Coke out of Wichita, Kansas. They spend millions of dollars across the country on elections. And when you have corporations backed by their interests, which is first and foremost is probably profit. You have corporations with other values that could be good or bad.
Good business.
But you have to keep your doors open and make money for your shareholders. you have these corporations, whichever their values, being able to spend money on elections to get people into office who represent what they want. And what's happened in a lot of races is that these politicians who have to recognize the role that these super PACs and super PAC donors have given to their campaigns, typically millions. I think since 2010, over $3 billion has been spent, billion with a B, in US elections.
That's crazy.
And there's so many like crazy facts or figures. And you think of a small grassroots donation, that's typically less than $200, probably falls between like 50 and 5. So if you think of how many people, how many CEOs, corporations, if you probably took top 100,000 corporations and saw what they put into a super PAC, as individual peoples, there's no way that we could have enough capital to
rival
that. And when you think of like people vote, corporations don't vote. Right. Our democracy is to represent
people, not corporations.
That has done a great disservice to our election system and how money is spent on it, and who politicians are listening to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it creates kind of a vacuum, right? When it's, I said that phrase earlier, like good business. And I always say that phrase kind of ironically, because often the way to make the most amount of money is not often the way that does the most good.
Exactly.
Right? It's not I can make cheaper products and make more money, but the products benefit people less.
Oh, yeah.
But if I can make more money in the business world, you say, well, that's good business, right?
Yeah.
That's still good business. And I don't think elections should be good business. I think they should be for the good of people. So we're starting to wrap up on time, and we want to hear from you guys in the intersection. What do you guys think? How do you guys feel about our current political system? What are some ways that you guys have been looking at getting involved? Have you guys seen loudlight.com from our episode last week? What have you seen, man? We want to hear about it. Please comment, like, subscribe, share. That helps get this message out. It's one way that we can continue to be engaged civically in this system that we're all a part of, to work towards the goals that we all have. So, man, get into that conversation. Thank you, Donnavan, for being here with us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes, and we'll see you guys next week in the intersection.